Jenny and myself. Welcome back in KQLCafe, January 2025. Super glad you could make it. And as always, nothing changed. We're still here, and we will plan to continue this journey with you in learning KQL. So the agenda, also nothing, no big changes there. We'll first try to give you some updates of what the things we have collected through social media and reading stuff and updates from Microsoft, etc. Then we have a very special guest, Ian Hanley. He's a perfect example for how small the world is. We chatted last summer. Last week, he bumped into some colleagues from the company I work for, and now he's with us. So it's a small world. Then we want to dive into some stuff that might be useful for you in your learning journey, or call it a repetition. And lastly, as always, our section, what did you do with KQL this month? And here, since we had December, a little pause, Johnny and I have some stuff we'd like to share with you and that you hopefully find useful. Good. So let's get started with the news. So first topic I want to highlight is an update from Bert-Jan. I guess if you do KQL, you also know Bert-Jan, also known as Bert-Jan Cyber. He's actually, I would call it, the father of our KQL query template that many of us use who share their repositories into KQL search. And Bert-Jan has put together a nice summary of useful KQL sources. So if you are in the, looking at how other people do things or interested in, finding queries, inspiration, definitely take a look at his collection of KQL sources. Then, as we already mentioned a couple of times last year, and we're definitely also looking to bring some of that KQL into this year's schedule as well, because so far, I would say the majority of people, working with KQL, interested in KQL, probably have their roots in the security space. But now with the introduction of Intune device query, I guess we'll see more and more adoption of KQL also from those people that can do endpoint management. So Uwe Kok already actually maintained since quite a time. He has been maintaining a repository. So if you're looking for inventory information, if you happen to use CMP vaulting in Config Manager in the past, or even did some other ways of reporting and collecting data with Microsoft Intune device query, you can now also, expound KQL into that space. So a little overview, no rocket science, you might think, but just another way how we can get to that information. So traditional system information like BIOS, certificate information, application crashes, memory usage, all the stuff that you would be interested when you are, an endpoint engineer. Then I also came across some blog posts from Morten Thomsen. He wasn't on my radar yet, but I figured that he wrote a couple of interesting KQL blog articles. I'm not even sure because I did already prepare these slides a while ago, so maybe he even continued. But you definitely, want to check those out as well. Then in Defender XDR, this comes from the What's New section that we have for all the Microsoft products. So there's now in preview in advanced hunting. We can now also refer to data that's stored into ADX, so Azure Data Explorer. This was something, that was already possible when you used to work in Microsoft Sentinel in the log analytics interface. But now, as Microsoft is making efforts for those who like to, that you basically can work just in Defender XDR and also access the Sentinel data. So as a logical step, they of course also now provide the possibility to run queries that go into your ADX instance if you happen to have any data stored or streamed or forwarded in Azure Data Explorer. And then another feature that was announced is aggregated reporting. Now, Johnny and I spent actually the whole evening yesterday to start looking into it because we both have this enabled in our tenant. But yeah, our tenants are baby tenants. There are just a couple of machines. But basically, and here I'd like to refer to, for the background, to some great blog posts from Olaf Hartong, who basically dives into the whole telemetry and, how does Defender work? Because, well, imagine with Windows Defender for Endpoint, basically in average, you are collecting on Windows clients. Let me be clear here. Slightly different on Linux sometimes, but in Windows, I can say from all the assessments I've done and where I run my KQL query that I will share in the show notes, on average, we can say every client submits about 10 megabytes a day. Now, of course, if you were to do traditional Windows event logging, that would be by far more. So how does Microsoft manage to, only submit 10 megabytes a day? Although when you look at the console and you look at the timeline, you see thousands of events. And that is, because there's some magic that happens behind the scenes in terms of sampling, but also, under the hood, not really every event is being sent. But they are already aggregated locally. Now, because some people have a desire, that's how I understand this capability to actually see more. Microsoft introduced this capability. It's called aggregated reporting. But they also clearly highlight that if you happen to forward your logs into Microsoft Sentinel through the Defender XDR connector, that additional costs might occur. Now, I would have loved to, tell you today, how much we are actually talking about. But yeah, my 2-3 clients are not really a reference. I've also looked into the possibility, can we use data transformation rules? So could I potentially avoid those action types to be actually forwarded into Sentinel? And that seems to be possible. So yeah, maybe hopefully next time we can talk a little bit more about the details of that. But I let Johnny present or talk about the next slide, so at least you know where to go with that.
Yeah, so the aggregated reporting, we spend a bit of time on that, and let's just show it because screenshots, it's not always that clear. So I'll take it from here, from my Defender portal, in the settings. And nowadays you can find it so here, if you go to the settings endpoints and then you go advanced features, here you have the aggregated reporting, and it works, like Alex said, quite well. It logs quite a lot of records, even though if it does duplicates, if it deduplicates actually. So that's a good one to notice. And for instance, if we go to advanced hunting, go union device star. Let me check. I have it. I had it here, but
where action type contains aggregated.
yeah, let's do. I find it hard to type aggregated sometimes. You can always do ends with.
And then you can do a summarize count by
Let's first
action
delve
type.
into one record. So the fun thing is over here, you can see how many occurrences it has, which is quite nice to know, because if someone does a brute force, or if they do a network scan, or if they if they do a lot of recurring data, which you normally might have missed due to the capping and how things are collected, you can use this one now. So, and if we do now we can do the summarize count by, we have the action type. We can also do by type, because type is the table where things are happening. And the access type, action type is the event that it triggered. You can also do a argmax timestamp. Just to get a good view of what's happening, we can go like this, and then we get the full last record. But still a bit of figuring out exactly the moving bits. See a lot of things happening during updates. It is still a good item to research, because there are some interesting use cases for brute forcing, for scanning, for repetitive actions, but we still need to figure out how much data, like Alex said, how much data is it collecting, what do we need, what do we see. But it's still a nice way, a nice place to play with the data.
Yeah, so if you're not forwarding your data into Sentinel, there shouldn't be any concern. It takes, as per the documentation, it will take a little while until you will actually see those events popping up. But then you should be good to go. So
I think for me, it was actually within hours that it started dripping in some data.
Yeah.
Now we can check if you do a summarize count by bin timestamp 1H.
The documentation refers to 7 days, maybe just to manage expectations.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. And now show the chart line. So it started slowly dripping in, and then during my busy hours, it has a lot of records. That's it's a fun new source to play with.
Good. Yeah, as promised, hopefully next time we'll have more and more details on deck, and maybe the community is even faster and already provide some showcases. Good. Then a couple of queries I just wanted to highlight that I found notable. So we have a query from Jay that looks into living off the tunnels IOCS. So definitely an interesting topic to dive into. Another query provided by Alex Teixeira regarding successful network connections using data sources from SpamHaus drop ranges. And then lastly, Nathan Webb shared a query around detecting paste and run malware with KQL. So as always, I'd like to, look at those, and not only from a detection point of view, but also from a KQL point of view. And again, sometimes the beauty is the simplicity. And on the other hand, sometimes it's really cool how people are piecing stuff together to get actually to the data needed. Good. And with that, a warm welcome to our guest, Ian Hanley. And I will leave it up to you to introduce yourself and tell us about the stuff that keeps you busy in KQL land.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody. My name's Ian Hanley. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm a security architect over at K-Micro/Sentinel 360, where I get to build cool solutions to stuff, and that's just how I like it. And I'm a father of 2 daughters, so I know something about risk management as well. So I've prepared a couple of PowerPoint slides I want to share with you guys today. And we're going to start off with some cost management. Let me share the screen. All right. Here we go. All righty. So, as we all know, the more things we connect to Sentinel, the more things that we have to pay for in terms of ingest costs, right? Not everything is free. So maybe one of the first things we want to do is try to figure out tuning out our ingest to tuning out the free stuff from the billable stuff so we can get a better idea and kind of track that down. The importance of cost optimization, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory if you ask me, right? You're trying to save some money and you're trying to get a handle on what's in your environment and why, for the most part. There's a lot of silly things that are superfluous that you can kind of tune out without sacrificing your security posture. So we'll take a dive into some of these things and how to identify them. That's the tricky part. Anybody can write a workplace transformation rule and tune something out, but I think it's better to try and figure out the root cause of the problem and get to the bare metal issue and solve for it there. That way you're not tuning out or making an exclusion or a suppression on something that could be a potential loophole to be leveraged against you. So the first thing I want to look at is the ingest volume. And I tried to query out or comment out all of my code so that you guys can see what each line is doing. And we'll show a demonstration of what all of these look like. Don't worry, I'm not just going to show a bunch of KQL queries at you. We're going to run these and see what it looks like. But the ingest volume query is going to look at the past 90, 30, 30, 60, and 90 is what I like to do, and look at what that trend looks like. So you see what your long-term trend is, and then as you get shorter, then you want to talk with your client about do you have anything that you're getting ready to decommission or onboard? Are you getting ready to spin up a bunch of firewalls, or are there firewalls that you knew you had but you haven't onboarded to Sentinel yet to get that telemetry? Things to keep in mind: you don't want to upgrade your commitment tier, right? And then all of a sudden have something get decommissioned and shoot yourself in the foot. You got to wait for 30 days to change it. This queries the billable usage table and helps visualize. I like to put render column chart, but you can always click the button. The next one I want to do is a cost summary query. And this will, over the past 7 days, separate out your billable ingest. If you look at this third line, calculated into gigabytes. Now, if you're a real stickler for gigabytes versus gibibytes, because I know you're out there, you're going to look at this and say 1024, shouldn't it be 1,000? Just swap out the number for yourself if that's what you want to do. I think IBM started doing that back in the day and everybody just followed suit. But it's a real topic of a heated debate. Anyway, so this is going to summarize the total ingested gigabytes over the last 7 days and calculate the daily average, the weekly total, and then provide an estimated monthly cost based on that trend. The next one we want to look at, and this one's a beast, so I didn't necessarily put all the comments in here or I'd never fit it. However, all of these queries are going to be available to you in via a GitHub. They're all hosted on my GitHub, and I'll provide a link to that afterwards with the full comments. But this one is is a fun one. It looks at the delta, right, in your log sources. So then you can isolate what are the sources that have had the biggest change. Now, oftentimes people say, I want to know what has had the biggest increase in my logs, what's going to cost me more, but it's just as worrisome if something drops off too, right? So you want to know that what is doing what in your environment. So this is a good way to do that. As you can tell, we set the periods using let statements and the current data. It's not as straightforward, but then we go ahead and join all of those together and project the data type, prior gigabytes, current gigabytes. This will all make sense when I show you a screenshot of the output here shortly. The top sources query. This is where I want to know what are the top 10 sources of ingest, top 10 logs. Just something easy to check on. If one of them is big or has bigger than expected or has had a big delta, a big change, whether it's good or bad, then you can dive into that table and start trying to identify or isolate it by whether the user or maybe the account that the user is generating these event IDs from. Try to solve the issue that way. You'd be surprised how often it's a misconfigured service account or something that's generating a lot of drop traffic on the firewall. It's useless, but you're paying for it, so may as well try to fix it. Then we have the event costs query. Just how much do these events cost me? Because it's one thing to look at your C-level execs and throw gigabytes at them or gigabytes, depending on who you are. And it doesn't mean a lot to them, but when you're trying to get this through somebody's head who's up there, put it in dollars and cents. And that turns heads quicker. And then this is where you would do volumes, right? For us who understand, gigabytes in terms of cost without having to have it translated. And then we tie it all together. Now, the way I did this, obviously, we all know that a Sentinel workbook is a collection of KQL queries under the hood, right? With just a fancy display. That's really all it is. So I took all of these queries that I had written, and instead of running them one by one in an environment for an investigation or to check something out, you can ask ChatGPT or Claude or something and say, hey, take all of these queries and that are stored in all of these GitHub repos or in my GitHub repo that have to do with cost optimization and put them into a gallery template for a workbook, please, and provide me with the code for it. That's exactly what I did, and I can walk you through some of that here soon, depending on how much time we have. But here's the link to where the template is. And if you want to take it a step further, you can actually integrate your workbook with Power BI to generate instant reporting. Once you get the connection across to Power BI, you just click the button and it runs the report just as you've left it for the workbook. It's really cool and it saves a lot of time, and it's great for those QBRs. Okay, so the moment we've been waiting for. Let's pull up what it looks like. So here's page one. Remember we talked about the 30, 90, 60, or 30, 60, 90-day billable ingest to compare? There's a drop down here for you to quickly grab that screenshot for your QBR report. This is a lab environment, so don't be concerned if everything just kind of dropped off in the ingest. It's not production. Then the cost summary we talked about earlier. Daily average, weekly total, and the estimate. Top 5 data sources, you can see the deltas or the changes. Top 10 billable. Pretty nifty stuff, right? That you can put all of those together into a gallery template and just create a new workbook and load that in there. And let me go to I think I can show you what I actually did here. You got to be really careful, by the way. You can't put any, I would highly recommend against putting any kind of client information in here at any time. This is just public stuff that I've been working on. So I was able to say, hey, take these queries from my public repo that everyone has access to already. If you're trying to build something with IP, that's a big no-no, just for everybody out there. I'm going to the profile where I have everything saved. Yeah, here, check this out. And spoiler alert, I kind of use this to build the PowerPoint that you were looking at as well. So break down these cost optimization queries from this gallery template that I built and extract the queries. That's just a copy of the template. Here's what it did. There's the time range and tab parameters, the different query volumes, or the different queries that it was able to pull. extract each one, comment them out for me. Yeah. And then it adds the comments. And then I said, give me a VBA code for a detailed PowerPoint presentation, which includes a slide on the performance of ingest cost optimization strategies, yada, yada, ending with a slide that ties them all together into a single workbook. The theme should be KQLCafe. There's the VBA code. All you got to do is open up PowerPoint, load the code, run it like a macro, and voila. Makes life easy. Anyway, that was the first presentation I wanted to show you guys. I hope we have enough time, Alex. You cut me off if I'm running over. Also, guys, let's keep this informative. We're all friends here. If I'm going too fast or if you've got a question, you don't have to stop and raise your hand. Interrupt me, please, and say, hey, whoa, hold up. All right, and ask your question. Okay. The next one I want to do is, remember I talked about all of these different KQL queries that I had built, and I wanted a way to use them. Just for fun, has anyone heard of Merrill Fernando's ID Power Toys? I always thought it was cool how that worked, and I wondered, how do you get whatever his logic is behind those Power Toys to run in your environment, right? So he has none of the risk of getting your data in, or handling your data. So built this the other night just as a fun one. This uses MSAL. I've already signed in before, so it didn't prompt me. We're going to go to this workspace, integrates with my list. We're going to do the 90-day billable ingest volume. There's the query, run in Sentinel. And this was the hardest part. And I know that you're saying, Ian, what does this have to do with KQL really? This sounds like just a fun side project. Part of what, yeah, watch this. Rerun. I don't know why, but the second time it always works. If you're trying to automate something wherein you want something to run a query in someone's environment for them when they click a link or something like that, some fun little nitpicky thing that I'm going to nerd out with you guys today, because we're all nerds here on KQL, right, is when you're copying the query over, it leverages an API and uses the a URL to pass your query, and you have to encode it. By default, when you're trying to build this in HTML, it will always fail, and it'll tell you it just couldn't find the like an error 404. It took me a while to figure this out, but you have to change this to gzip streaming, I think is what it's called, and encode your query a little differently, and I'm going to talk about that next. Brewing KQL queries with MSAL authentication. That's kind of just what we demonstrated, right? The overview, well, I kind of just showed you what it does. So let's run through these. Boilerplate, it's just basic HTML. Content goes here. Here's the fun stuff. There's two dependencies. We need MSAL and the Paco.js, and that's what compresses it into a gzip for transmission to Sentinel. That was the missing piece of this that I almost pulled my hair out over. MSAL initiation is really easy. This is all it takes. The other end of your, you have to make register an application in Entra ID in order for this to work, to host that. Now, everything's hosted on GitHub for free in an index file. You can make a free public-facing GitHub repo just by changing the name to the name of the repo, .github.io, and you can do as many as you want under by making new organizations. Anyway, everything's hosted for free. We did the MSAL like that. We registered our application, and I'll show you the permissions in a later slide. The authentication handlers are here. This is where you use the, notice it's user impersonation is the type of permissions that we're using for this, because when you go to click on the button, it asks you for your sign-in for MSAL. So it's using your permissions, not any kind of service account that I've created. Loads the subscriptions, right? So once it's got the token from your sign-in, it's able to go into management.azure.com, pull up what you have access to based on your token. That's what populates the workspaces you can pick from the dropdown. Load my queries from GitHub, api.github.com. That one was pretty easy to set up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And essentially the way it works is it's looking for any of my queries in the repo that end in KQL. That's how I name all my files. Here's the part that I wanted to talk to you about. At the end, once we've established our login, we've got our token, we've got our subscription, we've got our workspace that we want to run our query in, they've selected which query, we have to compress that and add it to the URL that we're going to redirect to, right? When you click on the run button, it takes you to the URL for the workspace you chose. Then it has to pass the query. So first off, this is where it takes it from what you selected in the dropdown from my GitHub, and then it has to create this giant URL. Normally, when you're doing this, you will not see is query base64 compressed true. However, when I talk about this, the subscription ID is here in purple. Resource group is in purple. These are variables that we took from the sign-in earlier. And then this part, encoded query, this has to be base64 compressed using gzip and that pako.js. And this is how we did it. These are literally the two pieces of code or snippets at the end. Then we look at the API permissions for the Entra registered app. It didn't need much. And then moving on, it's an SPA type of Entra ID registered app. I put in the URL for the GitHub piece, and that's how it knows to tie back for that. This was very important when I was registering the Entra ID app. And when you think back to if you were trying to emulate Meryl Fernando's ID Power Toys, but for KQL, you've got to allow other people from other tenants to be able to use it, right? Otherwise, the web page would only work for people inside your organization. And that's how I did that. Thanks for sipping some KQL coffee with me today. Yeah. What did you guys think? Are there any questions? I talked real fast.
Yeah, I think that's a handy concept. And in the background, I was just going to a normal log analytics workspace and create a share button and try to see if I see any similarities or. But there I just see that the whole query itself is also encoded.
Yeah.
And then added with a time span in plain text again. Yeah, maybe it could help to maybe decode it. Did you in the end got, this is what I see if I just do that. So I guess this part you already have, and the whole logic is then in here, right? And you're saying it's always failing the first time. Did you already figure it out how, or is that
I
still?
haven't. I figured
okay.
It was timing out before it had enough time to decode it or do what it was trying to do.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure. I just got it to work, I think, a day or two ago, and I thought, oh, this would be fun to talk about on KQLCafe. I'm still working on it. I want to be able to expand it to deploy more than just queries as well. Be fun to drop workbooks and other things like that in there.
Yeah, although I cannot speak for Ugur, but I could consider this a cool feature in KQL search because. At least for me, I go to KQL search, I find something useful, and we all end up doing this copy-paste thing, right, all the time.
Yeah. Here is where it creates the URL real quick, and that was the encoding part. I left out this as well at first, and I just thought I could encode the query. So anyway, just to save someone pulling out some more hair than they need to, that was something that I thought was kind of interesting. All this code and everything, by the way, is available on GitHub. Check it out anytime. I also want to point out any of the queries used in the workbook are also found here and commented out for anyone to pick up and use. These are the most common things that people ask me is, what's the gigabytes per table, or what's the day-by-day change here? What's the average daily ingest volume, cost of a table? What's this user doing? Top 10 billable log sources. Yeah. All the things I got tired of having to, recreate on the fly, so we can just copy and paste over.
Quick question, because you use this to reduce cost, but how do you decide where to reduce cost on? Because in the end, as a security analyst, I want to have all data. But then if you spend tons of money on useless data, it doesn't work. So how do you
Yeah.
balance it?
There's two different categories I like to divide my data into, and one has detection value and one has investigation value. Detection value will help you detect and act on something on malicious behavior. Investigation value means it might not be what helps you catch them in the act, but it's the first thing that your defer guys are going to ask for, right, for the investigation part. We typically want to have all of those, but not everybody's budget can fit, right? So we try to give a value maybe from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 on the detection and investigation values for these log sources based on your use cases and how you guys operate, what your industry regulations and that you are withheld to. And then we try to accommodate them that way. You can also go in, just speaking of industry regulations and cost optimization, you can try to figure out what logs you are required to maintain for up to beyond 90 days, for example, for FINRA and things like that. And you can individually change or adjust the retention on different tables in your workspace to try and save some money that way. And again, it's not always about saving money. Sometimes what you want to do is if you can free up some funds here, better spend them over here to to onboard something else that might be important. Maybe we found some Azure firewalls that you weren't ingesting into Sentinel, for example. We can reinvest that to try and get your security posture up. You never want to trim anything that's going to sacrifice your security posture. And now I know that contradicts, Johnny, with what you just said, saying I'm a security guy, I want all the data, right? So how do you trim something without sacrificing some security? The first place I go is workspace transformation rules. Alex mentioned one of those earlier. Firewalls like Palo Alto are very talkative. They're chatty. They send a lot more than what we really need to know what's going on. They send the firmware over, they send the model number, they send all kinds of stuff that we don't really care about. From a security perspective, I want to know what the timestamp was, the severity level, and the message. So I want to know when did it happen, how bad was it, and what was it? Right, and if you think about it, Palo and Fortinet are two of the ones we've done this for. You can trim out some of that excess superfluous data, and that way maybe 40 to 50%. I've seen it up to 60, depending on the firewall model. Ingest reduction for that, because you're trimming out the stuff that you really don't want, and then you're keeping the meat of the message. And that takes it a step further than, well, you don't want to necessarily tune out all the drop traffic, because you only care about what gets in, right? For the investigation standpoint, you kind of want to know what was trying. So rather than just tuning it out altogether, that's how I would approach it. You would tune out the individual pieces as opposed to the actual source. I hope that makes sense, everybody.
Yeah, it
definitely.
makes sense.
And we had a discussion about that in November, right? I mean, that is where the auxiliary. I can never figure out spelling that name right, but you all know what I mean
Bronze
about.
logs.
Yeah. That where we can summarize, also information, like you mentioned, drops. And yeah, this whole aggregated stuff is kind of a similar thing, right? It just comes, bottom up.
Yeah.
And aggregate. So I guess we just now have to figure out when to use what. And of course, everyone's mileage is different. Yeah.
There's another question in the chat.
Yeah.
From
Oh, yeah.
How were you tying the reports into Power BI?
I don't know if we have time to do that here, but I have an article on how to do that on my technical blog. And I was just actually about to mention, hey, I have another article on how to do this with a transformation rule. You guys are familiar with that landmine of an event ID 8002? Johnny knows. It's tied to, I think, AppLocker, and it's pretty much just an incremental counter. So all it does is when your user does stuff, it just ticks, right? It doesn't provide any security value whatsoever. But if you're not careful, I've seen it sometimes balloon up to a few $1,000s in an environment 1 month and then go back down. Avoid that landmine. Go ahead and check that article out and tune out event ID 8002 from your security events.
Okay,
in fact, I can drop
that
these.
change.
I can drop these here in chat if that's all right.
Sure. And as always, I'll work on the show notes, so where we try to, get everything in, so people also in about a week can go back and find all the links to all the stuff we discussed and shared. Yeah.
So here's I'm not a member of the chat, so I can't, but I'll
wait.
share that one with you, Alex. There's the workspace
Mhm.
transformation rules one. And somebody asked me about something else too that I said I had a write up for.
You
Power
should be able
BI.
to share now.
Oh yeah, the Power BI one. Yep, let me find that real quick.
Nobody can share in the chat.
But it was Earl was typing in the chat, and I'm not sure if everyone has the issue or.
Yeah, I can type.
And there you go, Alex. There's the
Yeah.
the Power
Can
BI one.
someone raise hands to see if they can type in the chat or not? Because if not, I have to fix something. Raise your hand if you can't type into the chat. Okay, so Diego can't, but others can. So we have a 50-50 split on being able to type in the chat or not.
Okay. Well, let's not try to fix it and break something. If people have a question, please try to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
That's good as
We're
well.
all friends here, yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, if anyone has any questions about any of those articles or anything, feel free to reach out. I think my email is featured here, and my LinkedIn profile is out there too.
Great.
Yeah, I hope that's been helpful, fellas.
Definitely. Yeah. And yeah, for anyone who hasn't come across Ian's blog post, definitely worth reading. Yeah, so maybe we do have some stuff. Maybe you can tell a little bit about, when did you came across KQL first time?
Wow, so I got my first introduction into security coming from break-fix. So as a Defender person, at first I thought, yeah, that as a break-fix guy, that thing that I'd close in the system tray all the time whenever it pops up, I'm an expert at that. And then quickly I figured out it was a lot more involved, a different kind of Defender. So I spun up a lab and got learning and everything. But while doing that, I noticed during workshops and things like that, I was always wrapping up my part and then throwing it over the fence to the guys on the Sentinel side. So I reached out to one and said, hey, what are you guys doing once we pass it off? What's the deal? Tell me about Sentinel. And I had one or two of them kind of show me what it could do. And I was pretty blown away and said, man, I got to get good at this. And there's a lot of different practical applications for it besides security was kind of how I got into it. I built a soil sensor because I like to grow peppers and, have a bit of a green thumb. And I needed, they're based on Raspberry Pi Zeros, and they have a little capacitive sensor that tells me the temperature and moisture. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could get some sort of an alert on my phone or email, but I don't know what kind of service would do that or what kind of platform I could even use. And the guy doing Sentinel said, hang on a minute. So we started working on ways to do that. And we built, we got everything hooked in through IoT Hub into a log analytics workspace. And then we built out some logic apps to monitor it so that we could get these alerts. And then we put in an email address and it tells me when things are too hot or too cold, that kind of thing. And one of the real fun things we got to do was IoT Hub has a limit on the number of devices you can communicate across the hub or the bus. On the free one, I think, on the free tier, it's 1. You can register up to 500 devices, but only 1 can communicate on the bus at the same time. However, you can use a logic app like a multiplexer or a muxer to put all the data together and send it across the bus at the same time as if it was one device, and then split it back out at the end. The trick is you just have to send the host name and name the host after whatever plant it is it's monitoring, so you can pull all the data back out and put it with the original host at the end. I've got a blog on how to do that as well.
Yeah. Okay.
If you guys want to follow.
Yeah.
One of the cooler things that the OS that you use for those Raspberry Pis, the Raspberry Pi OS, had made some major advances in their security, actually, that I discuss in that article as well.
Okay. So what is running on the Raspberry Pi? Are you sending the logs directly to the log analytics backend, or is that through IoT Hub?
At first, I was doing it with Fluent. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
So it wasn't through the IoT hub. It was just kind of doing an HTTP listener sort of deal. But I think there's 4 different iterations where I improve it every time, and in the end, it's through IoT hub, and yeah.
Okay, so device sends to IoT hub, and from IoT hub, you're basically sending your stuff to log analytics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sending my telemetry over, and it's formatting it into degrees Fahrenheit, and yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. That sounds also like a funny, totally different application of log analytics and KQL. Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, you can set up a home security system that way, right? Still sort of security related, but if anything gets tripped, you can have an analytics rule that's running every couple of minutes, and yeah, can tell if something's stopped reporting in.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Good. Any questions? Anyone? Otherwise, we'll continue. And actually, you started this, Ian. So I thought, okay, maybe spontaneously, because you started sharing, using AI and then do something with KQL. So I actually I had a whole bunch of exported ARM templates, and I thought, let's make them readable. So here again, very short prompt. I have a bunch of JSON files, and please convert them into a markup. And that's it. And I get a markup, and the end result looks like this. And yeah, I honestly, the reason why I show this, it's just a time saver. I mean, this is no rocket science. I probably would have figured out how to create a script to do that on my own as well without the help of, AI and ChatGPT. But I'm definitely sure I will probably have needed 4 attempts until I get my typical Alex typos out of the way and, how to know exactly where to loop through the JSON file and extract the piece and bits I want. And here you just throw in an example, and there you go. So yeah, if you happen to have JSON files and you want to ARM templates and you want to convert them into readable format, ChatGPT or Copilot is your friend to do that. Yeah. Good. So then I suggest let's move over. The reason I brought this one up, and one of the participants might be familiar with this topic, and I also discussed it with Johnny, and I thought, and it even happened to me, where you take an awful length of effort to break down something that's stored in a URL or path. And I thought it might be worthwhile because there are so many, useful functions and operators in KQL, but maybe not all of them are present. And I thought it might be good, maybe for those who haven't seen it, for those who had forgotten about it, to briefly talk about 2 operators called parse URL and parse path. So I leave it up to Johnny to elaborate and briefly explain what they do and how they might be able to save you some time as well.
Yes, so I'll share my screen. Perfect. Window. It is. Took a while, sorry. So we started discussing the parse URL. And to do that, let me just first turn up some URLs. So what it is, you can, in all your logs, you can have URLs and you can parse them because to find out if something is linked maybe to a domain or to something else. So what you want to have is you want to have like a normalized column or with HTTPS with the protocol or without. So what they did, they created a option to parse URLs. because as you can see in this case, there is not all have the protocol, and some have maybe ports or queries or something else. So what we want to do is basically we want to have more information about all URLs that have been accessed. Over here you can see there are some queries in there, but let's use it with the operator. Let me make it a bit bigger. So what I did is we have the parse URL over here, and the parse URL returns a set, an array of data. You have the protocol in scheme, you have the host, so basically the host of the domain, you have the port path. There's anything in there which you can
Note
use
the
to
username
build.
and password. It would be the first time I would grab out usernames and passwords if they were true plain text.
Yeah, so if you have in the URL, if it's an FTP link, for instance, and you repopulate username password, then it can be in there. So for now, I filtered it. We have the remote URL in the first column. Then we have the scheme, we have the host. So basically, we have all the information we want. But as you can see already over here, the main problem with these kinds of parsing tools is it doesn't always understand what we want, basically. So here you have the domains, but it didn't parse it. And then you have places where it did parse. You have the scheme, so you know if it's HTTP, HTTPS, the host. So it's good that these operators are there, but it's not always working as you expect. So it's always good to validate your data to see if it's working or not. And you can also maybe build a parser for yourself, or you can make it in a way that it's grabbing both. So for instance, what I did a while ago, I wrote some async parsers. And let me just share it for a second here. So basically, these are the async parsers from Sentinel. And what we did during that project, you can have a variable with all the domains you want to see. And in this case, we used the split operator to grab parts of the URL. So basically, we can cut it like this, yes. And go back to here. And just that one. Remote URL. Was it like this? Doesn't. No. Sorry about that. Extend L is remote URL. Why doesn't it like me today? Extend L 1212. Yeah, it should work. Extend L. Oh. Filter result scalar. There is a break in. So. Okay, so this also isn't perfect because for sometimes it's not splitting as the way as I expected. So same thing still goes. Always test your data before using it properly in production. I think if you want to have an easy way, you could also use, for instance, if you parse it with regex, then you can play around a bit with it. So that's one thing I wanted to show. So you have the parse URL operator, but it's not always as great. And if you want to build something your own, then also be wary of all the options you have. So the next thing was if you want to parse folder paths. So this is quite simple. But as you can imagine, you could also have like network shares, for instance, and then it can be a bit harder to parse. So one of the other built-in operator was the parse path, and in parse path you basically have a value which contains this first. Contains all the nice things. So you have the root path, you have the directory path, the directory name, because maybe you want to search in certain directories. There's the file name, of course, the extension. It's quite nice because one of the things I tend to do is if I'm looking for PowerShell scripts or DLLs, I want to know the extensions. So you can use this operator, the parse path, actually a function to get the data. And of course, you can use bag on back to see everything in a separate column. What's good is that, for instance, in Linux, it doesn't like the extensions because you don't always have the extensions in Linux. But for the Windows bits, it's working quite well. I haven't seen a lot of empty values. Check just to be sure where directory is empty directory path. So as you can see, this one works better because we don't have any empty values in here, which is good. And as you can imagine, you also have this one. I haven't played a lot with the ADS, the alternative data streams. As you can imagine, if you want to send data to your during a test, or if you have a device which you want to have data on, which shouldn't be in a normal path, you can use alternative data streams where you can append the data to a file which you don't regularly see, but if you call it with the alternative data stream, then you can see the data. So this operator works quite good. It's also not that heavy on the system, which is also good to know. This is a good way to maybe figure out some folders or some files or extensions.
Yeah, I personally, I mean, I agree. Of course, you could create your own stuff, but that might not always be at hand. And I use these things a lot for just spontaneous data mining. Like as a real world example, I'm currently working for a client who wants to figure out a little bit more what's going on with portable apps in his environment, how to detect and potentially later prevent as well. But to do an as-is analysis, this parse path has been quite useful by looking at anything that's on a local drive, on portable drives, on network drives. And with just a few clicks and a few kicks on the keyboard, you can basically start to split up the information. Of course, you could do a substring or a regex and whatsoever. God bless those that can do regex by heart. I can't. So call it, the operator for the poor man who doesn't know regex by heart to still accomplish something. Yeah. But yes, I do agree that if you wanted to do something that is, solid rock and that is maybe a detection, and if you're telling me like the parse URL isn't that reliable always, yes, I would agree. Then you probably do something on your own that is a little bit more rock solid. Yeah. Good. Then let's move on to what have we done this month. So, yeah, I had the pleasure to dive into the topic of Azure DevOps a little bit more as usual. And one of the super cool functions it has, and you'll be astonished. So I'm not here for marketing, but if you happen to have developers in your environment, and if you want to give, Defender for DevOps a try, I mean, there's other products that that can do that as well. But in this case, it's actually super cool. It will analyze your code and it will make recommendations. It will, recommendations on your DevOps infrastructure, but it can even make recommendations to the point of, on line 55, there's an issue. And yeah, of course, beside working on that with the customer, I always have this, where's KQL here? So I ended up creating a KQL query that you can run in both Defender or in Sentinel using the ARC. We spoke about the ARC argument earlier about the Azure resource that we can query as well. Unfortunately, we can still not use it in Sentinel to create an analytics rule. Still a pity, but I can understand why. But yeah, so that's a query I created. And then, yeah, we'll do a little bit of ping pong. I'm going to hand it back to Johnny, who wrote the KQL. Yeah.
So I'm going to show quite a large query now. What it is, I think back in 2019, I wrote a query about getting data from the TVM, from Threat and Vulnerability Management. Let me just start sharing. Share screen app. A while ago, a long time ago. So back in the day, I wrote a nice blog. And it's not. It's still working. That's good. So what I did basically, I just looked at the device TVM data and then enumerated what were severities and made columns for what was exploitable and whatnot. But this is quite basic. So with the new graph operator, I wanted to play around a bit more. As we grow older, we learn better KQL. So what I did is I started writing a quite big query, after which we also shared. So basically, what I did is first I made a data table with some columns: severity, 0 day, has exploit, verified, due date, and score. And basically what I did is I made a list of all criticals and then 1 or 0 in Boolean for if it has a 0 day, if it has an exploit, if the exploit was verified, and also a time span. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to rate the vulnerabilities against the day when the patch got published and the SLAs for patching. So I started playing around and I found this, it works quite good. Just to show, if we go here to the severity table, it's just a basic table with all the values, so we can compare the records we have against the table. So, and then I started using the exposure edges, because in Defender, We already have edges and nodes, which is used in graphs. So node is basically items and edges are how they are connected. So basically here what we do is we say, hey, make a graph for us and link source node ID to target node ID on exposure nodes based on the node ID. If we run this, this will break because it says, hey, I can't do anything with this because it wants to or show nodes or it wants to show edges. So if we say by graph to table, and let's show nodes. So basically now it returns all nodes which it has linked, but because we are using all the data in the Defender TVM data, it's gonna be a lot of data. So what we can do is we can wait a second. Last time it took about 10-15 seconds because it has to populate. So we can also filter, for instance, hey, we want only to see the devices, so we only want to see the CVEs, because now it has related everything. So a CVE is affecting a device, and then you have the device. So it's now populating all nodes. So you have all users, everything that is related in the device TVM data is gonna pop up here. It's having a bit of a hard time, but so we'll let it run for a second, and then in the meantime, we'll go to the next step. Because basically, in the next step, what I'll do is I'll do a graph match. So basically, I'm telling it how to relate things in a way I want to. Basically, what I did is I first put cycles none, and it's not about bicycling, but it's about having path traversals. Because if you have, for instance, Excel, you had the recursive loops. That's the thing you prevent with cycles equals none. So it won't traverse back over a path until it crashes. So it's good. And basically, after that, this between round brackets, it's a node. So we have a node linked to a label, to an edge, and then it's targeting a device. So this, in the first bit, we say, hey, we have an entity, a node, and we have a label, and node, an exposure edge, which is targeting a device. So we know that that's the way it's linked. And then from there, we have another edge, and in this case, we call it logged on users, and it can be multiple links, so we can have from 1 up to 3 linked further down the road. And then we have users. But at this point, it's still just words because we haven't matched anything in here. The table is still loading, so let me continue. So basically on line 49, in this case, what we do is, hey, we know that this CVE, we want to make sure that the node label, because we'll see that in the nodes, is CVE. So we know for sure that with all the relating it's done, we know that now at this point, if we do this, that the CVE is actually the CVE according to the node label. And we should do the same with the edge, because we know we have this affecting edge. So we want to make sure that affecting is actually with the label of affecting. And then I commented this one out, but basically you can leave it in. So I didn't want to see the item. So a node device has node properties, and in the raw data we have the sensor state. So basically what I do in this line is I say, hey, I don't want to see any devices which have gone dark or inactive recent. So basically all the devices I'm returning now with this query are just all the active devices in the last 30 days. Next, because we're matching users, we need to flag it out how we can do that. It didn't like my query. So basically what we do is we say, hey, if the label has credentials of or frequently logged on by, we can relate the user to a device. And in the node label, I want to know if we have a user principal or service principal or username in there. So basically, these are the prerequisites of what are we returning when it's according to the labels. So next, what I did is I projected something. So basically, from a CVE, I want to have these values in my graph. From the device, I want to have these values. And then from the user, I want to basically have the name. So if we run it like this, it should be a lot smoother because it doesn't have to return all CVs. So it shouldn't take that long in my small environment, but
I'm telling you, that drum roll button would be cool, right?
it would.
Mm-mm.
I used to have an app on my phone that you could do it from there, but
Or really record those things.
we can do it later one during video editing. We can add it.
Exactly.
There it is.
Okay.
So basically, we related everything, and now what we have is we have all CVEs, and we have the date if it has a 0 day, if it has an exploit, and so on and so on. And we also have its targeting on my device, and we have the sensor state, the machine group, so we can attribute it. We have the user. So basically, we have 2 or more devices because I have my own. I log in with the administrator on one of my test VMs, my own device. So you have a on-prem account and a cloud account. So this is all nice, but it's still a bit hard to compare. So now what we'll do is we'll say we'll do a lookup on the severity table on the top, and we want to match severity 0 day as exploit and exploit verified. And this way, unfortunately, it will take a couple of seconds. We'll get the values back. So let me just save us some time and add this step, because what I want to show is only the items which have the remediation expired, because I say here, if the last modified date of the CVE plus the due date, which is the time span, is less than now, then we return as 1. So then the remediation is expired. And if it's a 0, then I still have time to patch it according to the table above. And you can basically say, hey, anything that is critical, I want to have patched within a day. And everything that's not critical, well, I don't care, and put it on a year. This should have been. It's always fun. I ran this query 1,000 times. I've run it up to environments with almost 10,000 devices without any issues. No,
I
okay.
think I always have a maintenance window on the last Tuesday of the month.
Yes. So basically, in my environment, I have these patches are missed the due date or the expiration date. So this is a way where you can say, hey, let's filter it. I'm just gonna skip a bit ahead.
Yeah. I just to maybe add some context. So Johnny has defined for Johnny Corp basically his SLAs here, right? So if you happen to have SLAs, or at least best effort times for patch management, that might be a cool thing to run. And yeah, a real way how you can basically measure that. Of course, in all fairness, some of the GVM data, I don't know how often it's being updated. So I would be careful in the heat of your patch management cycle to fire off tickets based on this telemetry. And I say this because I've done so earlier with a client, and yeah, we have to be a little bit careful because by the time the ticket went to the service desk, the device actually was already patched, but there was some lag in between, how whether the TVM data was actually up to date on the device. Yeah.
Cool.
It definitely gives you a good view on your overall state, and especially if you see things like in very large numbers, right, where in theory, according to your security policy, you should have certain response times, and where you can identify, okay, apparently nothing has been done. Yeah.
And also even today at the friend, we ran a query, and we saw that, for instance, one of the servers wasn't patched properly while the others were. But it's a good way to easily pick out things because you have the scoring already from the TVM, but this for me suits better, and also because I can dynamically set a due date for a patch instead of just guessing some things based on the severity or on the patch release date. So for me, this works quite good. And basically, I've skipped some steps, but what I do here is I grab the device ID from the entity IDs. And then I add data from the device software vulnerability. So we now have the CV score instead of just the CVE ID. So we have the software vendor and the name and the version. And because we have that, we can also add the device TVM software evidence beta. And that one holds also the evidence. So for instance, if we go here to the right, we can see, hey, we have this registry path for this Python version. And we also have some traces on disk for here. So we can see, hey, in this folder, it's there. Because sometimes you have the discussion because there's a leftover registry key or there's a DLL which isn't directly related to the software, but it's still getting recognized. So it's good to add this data in your report. And then next, what I do here is I basically combine the CVS score, the software vendor name, version into a single record because we want to move everything together so that we can have an overview per device. So if we run it like this, we have this record, and then what I also do is I use the hint shovel key in here because I want to sort the data I have on device ID because in a large environment, it can be quite heavy on the system. I also want to have a sum of the score per device so I can see, hey, this device has a high score. I do a decount, distinct count on the CV ID. So we have all the unique CVs. Then I say important CVs has to have a score of 13 or higher. So basically, if we go up to my thing is 13 is, so basically if it's critical and has an exploit or more, and also if it's a high and it has a verified exploit or more, then it should trigger, and also mediums. So that's a way I split it up, but then again, you can basically grab these numbers, wrap it down to your own vulnerability management system, or maybe say, hey, if it has a public IP which isn't from the office, or if it's internet facing, or if the user also has admin permissions on the device, you can also tie everything together in here. So basically, if we look in here and we can see, hey, this device has a score of 580. And then we can see the the array of the created dynamics which I made. So we can see Firefox is this one, and it has a 9.8. So these are all the CVEs which require some attention. And then you can also see, okay, so according to my stats, we don't have any important CVEs, so probably this 9.8 doesn't have a verified exploit. It's only a critical one. So yeah, it's a bit how do you want to structure your vulnerability management. And the last thing which I did was I did a count, because here we created an array, a set, and now what I want to do, or an evidence, and now what I want to do is count it, because if we have a device with a lot of evidence, it can be quite easily fixed, because you can use your remote management tool or Intune or a remote PowerShell just to clean up these evidences. Because usually it's an uninstall string or it's a file, so you can also use it as guidance on which item should you create or look into first. So basically, we can see this one has a lot of evidence, but where do we have it? Evidence. Oh, yeah, here. So back. So these are these, and the other one is this. So that's my TVM graph playing with data for this month.
Cool. I'm sure you learned a lot. And you've looked at a lot of data.
Yes.
I can already think of some awesome use cases for that. If you've ever done security for a bank, like and they're FDIC backed, they get dinged on that FDIC audit if they have more than one version of Firefox in their environment. So not only Defender for Cloud Apps is how you do that, but this is a really great tool for looking at the different versions of Python in their environment and being able to figure out where they live.
Yeah. And although some of the data is not available in Sentinel, but you could create your own an automation account and leverage graph and execute a query for there and then process it, do that kind of stuff. Yeah. Cool, Johnny, thank you. So in the interest of time, let us move on. Only one or two shirts. Johnny has another one. Microsoft Service Tags as external data.
Shall we leave this one for next month, or shall I do it now?
Depends on how much detail you want to go. If you're gonna explain us each line again, then let's keep it for next month then. If you want to digest really, I know you put some work into it, but I want to be careful about the time. That we don't stretch people's clock too much. If you're
we want to see it in all its glory, right? You can't skimp. You got to show us the details.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So
let's keep
it for next time. A short one. MFA Fraud Alert. If you happen to work with Entra ID, be aware that this capability is being deprecated, and there are a lot of Microsoft templates in Sentinel, and I know people have built their own detection queries, so that's going away. So you will have to look for similar things like report suspicious activities. All the details is in the GitHub as well. And the other one, I was a little bit amazed how many people were happy to see this based on the socials feedback. No, it's not this one. This is just the details of the KQL query. This one. So I guess you always want to know when someone or intentionally or unintentionally makes changes to your security configuration. And although historically we did have audit logs when end users were performing self-service password SSPR activities, but there was kind of a gap when it came to the backend configuration settings itself. So that gap is now closed. So since mid-January, By now, I've run it across a couple of tenants. It should be now auditable everywhere. So whenever someone makes a change, imagine hacker comes in and allows phone or SMS things that we want to get rid of, and reactivates those, or maybe completely turns off things. Now we can detect that, and if you actually look into the audit logs itself and parse them, you can basically get everything out of there. Here I just made a simple query, and it's totally nonsense because I just clicked on some buttons on and off within the area of SSPR configuration. But bottom line is, we can basically see every individual setting that you have in your portal, and you see, like we see very often in this type of logs, previous value and new value. Good. And with that, I would say let's call it a wrap, and we let Johnny next time digest his query, his second query that he had prepared. Yeah. So thanks,
guys,
everyone.
I really appreciate the opportunity. I've had a blast getting to talk to everyone here. Yeah. Thanks again for having me on, Alex and Johnny.
You're welcome, and hopefully
thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so maybe a little bit info about next time. Give me those 2 extra minutes. So next time, just to make you aware of that. So our agenda is already published here. Registration, right? And next time, I really recommend we have someone coming from Microsoft talking about Fabric. And if you follow a little bit, the trends and news around Microsoft and logging and data lakes and whatsoever. So you definitely don't want to miss out that one, because if you work with KQL, you might come across that one or the other way anyway. And then in March, we have Sergio Albia from the Swiss Switch. So Switch is the company that manages our domain registration and much more. So and he's also busy with detections and monitoring and research. So we'll have him as well. And yeah, we have some people in the backlog that we want to bring on as well. And then maybe a little teaser for those who missed this. So we did publish all the CustoCon videos. CustoCon is our KQLCafe conference. And in fact, we are going to do this again. And as I speak, Johnny is busy with preparing the new landing zone website. We don't have a location fix, so the idea is that we do this kind of semi-hybrid, so a little bit hybrid and much more online. It will be in the November-ish timeframe, around, I believe, 7th or 8th of November, and hopefully in the next 6. Oh, sorry.
Hope 6.
Yeah. So first day is 6th. So maybe mark that in your busy event or work or holiday calendar. And yeah, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, we're on the final discussions with potential locations and of course with some speakers. But yeah, we'll definitely, after we had a blasting in 2024 in November, and we definitely want to repeat this. So hopefully see you there at the latest as well. With that, I'd like to thank you for attending live, or if you watch this on YouTube later, thanks for watching till the end. Have a great day, afternoon, evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.